Hey everyone, Sign Up Live here. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the Enclave. Today we're going to open this video with a quote from President Dick Richardson.
To turn it into a staggeringly effective killer. Any humanoid that isn't inoculated against its effects before its release will die. That is the project.
All right, we're going to start with the background of the Enclave. Before the Great War, the Enclave was a cabal of powerful individuals from across the United States, including presidents, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, prize winning scientists, members of the military, influential politicians, wealthy industrialists, and other powerful men and women, who together formed the group. In the opinion of its members, it was the greatest assembly of minds on American soil. Together, these figures created a unified, horizontal, extra governmental collaboration intended to shape America policy for its own ends. To some on the outside, particularly in later centuries, it was not the United States as a whole, but the rich and powerful who were unwilling to give up their power. The Enclave was involved in many of the deepest conspiracy and secrets of the federal government, such as covering up the existence of extraterrestrial life, mainly to end the studies of alien technology for their own use. When the organization Corin Vern tried to expose this conspiracy, stealing an alien tech based prototype weapon, they were swiftly hunted down and killed. In preparation, as the resource wars dragged on and the risk of nuclear war increased, members of the Enclave invested into various contingency measures to survive the coming war, funded by corporation and government money. These installations would enable the Enclave to continue waging war even after the United States ceased to exist. On one such installation was the presidential oil rig out in the Pacific Ocean, owned by Poseidon Oil, with the White Spring Congressional Bunker acting as a hub for future Enclave operations. Convertible, conveniently funded by funds embezzled from the Department of Agriculture by its Secretary Thomas Eggert. Other facilities prepared in advance was Raven Rock and the Kavik Mudone platform. The Enclave used Project Safe House and Vault-Tec network of underground shelters for the grand social experiment to test the occupants in unique circumstances. Vault monitoring and research were conducted under the Vault Behavioral Project. In order to monitor the populations being exterminated upon the Enclave's oil rig possessed a great deal of equipment that allowed them to observe and control the vaults. For example, the Enclave sent an all-clear signal to Vault 8 shortly after the war, prompting them to leave their vault and build their city. These monitoring tools also let the Enclave see the population of Vault 13 was largely intact, although that wouldn't become important until much later. The original idea behind the Vault experiment was to gather data to enable the creation of multi-generational starship to settle another planet, as the Enclave assumed Earth would be rendered uninhabitable by nuclear war, and human civilization would need to expand into the stars to survive. On the eve of the Great War in March 2077, within the world heading directly for nuclear conflict, the President of the United States, other members of the Enclave retreated to various fortified areas around the globe. Others remained behind, only retreating to fortify shelters as nuclear war became imminent. as the shadow government poised to take over the U.S. government should worst occur by 2077. The existence of the Enclave would potentially known to the public, but only vaguely at best. Most of the subject long-standing rumors, but covered in at least one newspaper in Boston in the last week before the war. Although news outlets across the nation picked up the subject of missing president discussing the rumors of peace negotiations with China and the president's absence, the Enclave was already headed to the ground. However, that did not stop individuals from attempting to uncover its existence, both from within and without the government, as the only way to join the Enclave was to be invited by them. The large majority of the government was unaware of its existence, beyond rumors and integrations in the budget. The United States military refused to allow the Enclave access to some of its system. Furthermore, the power that would be in the government largely opposed the notion of nuclear first strike against China that some members of the Enclave promoted, even. Since theory wasn't perfect, and some members of the public and government persuaded their own investigation. In June 2077, Senator Blackwell began an investigation into congressional bunker project and Vault-Tech's potential involvement. His activities drew the line of Thomas Eckhart, a powerful member of the Enclave, responsible for establishing Enclave control over the White Spring bunker. Following a threat on his daughter's safety, Blackwell went into hiding, joining the Free States and attempting to publicly unveil the Enclave's existence in a controversial interview published in the Charleston Herald. In reality, this was not caused by Eckhart or anyone else in the Enclave, but rather by a completely unrelated regional business magnate, Daniel Hornwright, who had sought to remove Blackwell on account of the senators opposing to automatic ballot vote. Independent investigation by reporter Mags Bison for the Boston Bugle newspaper also uncovered evidence linking the Enclave with the highest echelons. She figured out the president abandoned the White House in favor of the Poseidon oil rig, and an anonymously source tipped her off that it was officially designated was Control Station Enclave. This gave, as Verschonen stated, credence to the long-running rumors of secret militarization shadow government known as the Enclave that would take control of the United States in the event of a nuclear catastrophe. Russo was right. However, she published her revelations on the front page in the week that would end in said nuclear conflict. Although news outlets across the nation picked up the subject, discussing the rumors of peace negotiations with China and the president's absence, the Enclave was already headed to underground. Scattering of the World Great War. On October 23rd, 2077, the Great War resulted in the destruction of the Old World and the creation of the post-atomic wasteland that would dominate the globe for the next several hundred years. The United States government largely ceased to exist, and despite well-prepped plans, the nuclear attack caused the Enclave by surprise. And some government officials were even surprised to retreat to the congressional bunker and never made it, either failing to respond to hell or removed from the list prior to the bombs for unknown reasons. Members of the Congress who made it to the congressional bunker and were not part of the Enclave were summarily executed. Surviving members were then put into a vote as to whether to use resources of Appalachia to continue the war against China or oppose Eckhart's plan. Those that disagreed with Eckhart were locked inside, while those that disagreed with Eckhart were allowed to exit, at which point those inside the room they were voting in were gassed and executed. Communication between White Spring and the rest of the Enclave was mysteriously cut off almost as soon as the bombs dropped. Short of physical cutting the hardline communication system, this shouldn't have been possible without contact with the oil rig. Raymond Rock and other Enclave outposts, Eckhart proclaimed himself President of the United States. In the Appalachian Enclave, without any opposing, Eckhart quickly hijacked the mission of Appalachia Enclave, ignoring his orders and shifting from a primarily scientific mission to a mission of revenge against China. Thank you for watching the video and have a good day.